Hi, everyone. Welcome to season 13 of Drink It In, the podcast, The Chosen Path. People are just loving this season. And I said, okay, I got to find more people that chose this amazing path of Judaism. And I came across on social media, on Instagram, Meorah, and I reached out to her and I was like, please, 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 please. And she's like, okay, finally I got a yes. You got to be persistent sometimes. And I happens to be a lot of the people I interviewed, I know their story a little bit, but Meorah, I don't know her story at all. So I think together, as you listen, we're all going to discover Meorah and her story. So take it away, Meorah. Why don't you tell us where you're from,
Thank you.
where you are right now, and some of your story of what brought you to Judaism.
Sure. So my name is Meorah. I'm originally from Massachusetts, which Israelis have a very hard time pronouncing. And I'm here right now in Jerusalem, which is where I live. I made Aliyah 3 years ago from the Boston area. And it's interesting to say that, well, one, you didn't sort of research me, but even if you had looked for my story, you kind of wouldn't find it because I'm really just starting to share the official story of my conversion, which is kind of funny because I've been on YouTube for at least 5 years or so, actually sharing a lot about my life, about my Jewish journey, about my conversion process and making Aliyah and all that. But I've really been challenged with sharing the actual story, not because it's so complicated. It's actually somewhat straightforward, which I'll share those pieces. But it's been really hard for me to encapsulate how do I explain to another person, another human being with words what this thing is and what I went through. And so I've really struggled over the years of how to actually answer that question, which, as I'm sure you know from talking to many converts and being, so steeped in this topic, on the record, you're not supposed to ask somebody, are you a convert? But in practicality, we get that asked all the time, constantly. Especially here in Israel, it's very common to ask, where are you from? What's your story? Because everyone comes from all these cool, interesting backgrounds. And I'm no exception. I get that asked pretty much everywhere I go. And then inevitably, the question of my Jewish status comes up. And why are you convert? Why did you do this? And all that. And in those moments, I almost just freeze. And I kind of just, it's sometimes I get a little bit even flustered of it's sort of like a cocktail party moment. And you're meeting somebody at a Shabbat dinner or just some situation where they're just making light conversation. And this heavy question comes upon me. And I'm just oh, how do I do this? So I feel like I've been workshopping this. And some people are really out there and speak so beautifully about their story, and it's very inspirational. I'm sure I saw on your podcast you had many such people like that, and for me it's almost like this big weight. So I've really been trying to figure out how do I actually share this, and I think a lot of it has been more about timing and sort of at what stage in my life am I prepared to share this story.
So can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah, of course.
I just want to say thank you then
Oh
for
yeah.
coming
No,
on
yeah.
the podcast and sharing it. Especially, this is not something that you do that often. So
Right, yeah.
listeners, listen up because this is going to be something that you don't necessarily hear that often. And so I really appreciate you, and I really
Sure.
appreciate you taking the time and processing it.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you said so many times people ask, where are you from? It happens to be that's a Jewish cultural thing. You should
Right.
know.
Yeah.
When I interviewed Nissim Black, he said that was one of the things that was hard for him to adjust to Jewish culture. He says, where I come from, that's suspect. Why are you asking me all these questions?
Yeah.
And
Right.
it's so interesting because we in the Jewish community, now you're accustomed to it, right? But that's just a way of connecting people, trying to just connect one Jewish soul to another Jewish soul.
Totally. And I if I had heard you explain that to me years ago, boy, would that saved me a lot of emotional struggle because it took so long to get used to that. And yeah, back in the States, it's a little bit well, I'm from here, and you get a little defensive, so it's a little bit, you have this armor up. So anyhow, really, what I often tell people, which is true, is that I have a little bit of a typical story of a convert, a very common story rather, in that I grew up Christian. I think a lot of converts find their way into Judaism through Christianity. I grew up very like, I wouldn't say very religious, because, that word means something very different in our context. But I was a very spiritually minded, religiously inclined child. I loved praying. I loved going to Sunday school, going to church. Always felt very connected to God, and just this idea of religion and spirituality, even as a child. So it's always something important to me. And as I grew up, I would go into church with sort of a list of questions for after Bible study, and ask my pastors and teachers and such, like, why this, why that. And unlike in Judaism, it's quite frowned upon in Christianity, or at least from the Christian background I was from. I was Protestant. We went to a Korean Methodist church. And I would just invariably get an answer like, well, just have faith, or, well, that's why we need to do missionary work and convert people. And whatever the answers were, they were just not very satisfying. And the main issue, the main theme for me was this Christian idea of salvation. So even as a little girl, these vague notions of salvation and redemption were very interesting, very exciting to me. Like, there was something I wanted to dig into more there. And I think in my childlike mind, just the idea that there was something that would happen, that we would reconnect with the Creator, was like, wow, that's really cool. And there was something really interesting there. And so I pulled at that thread a little bit, and was just really uncomfortable with the Christian idea of salvation, this idea that you have to believe in, the so-called Son of God, and that if you don't believe in him, you'll quote unquote burn in hell. And of course, I'm very much simplifying it, and I don't mean to sort of belittle Christian theology, but as a child, that was a general framework. And I was really uncomfortable with that. And I would ask pastors, I would say, okay, well, what if there's a little boy in the middle of the jungle and he's never seen a Bible? And he's a sweet little boy, he's a good person. There's no way that I know that God is just, he's merciful. There's no way, why would God condemn him to hell? That was crazy to me. And of course, there really wasn't a good response to that. And the response I would get was, that's why we have to do missionary work. And being Korean, I'm Korean American. I was born in America, but my parents are from Korea, so it's still quite close to me. The idea of our family being Christian also started not to sit right with me. My grandparents were the first generation of Korean Christians, Jesuit missionaries, or I think my great-grandparents. And Jesuit missionaries came to Korea, and it was not by force or anything like that. It was very very much voluntary. But this story of white missionaries coming and saving the the poor Koreans or whatever, something about that was just like, I don't know, I wanted to make sure that whatever my faith was, whatever I believed in, and how it connected to God, was really what made sense to me, and not just something I adopted. So by the time I was 15, we had what we called a confirmation in church, where you sort of redeclare your faith, or sort of just affirm it. And at that point, I was like, I don't believe in this stuff. I don't connect with it. I don't really think I'm Christian. From that point on, I started basically identifying less and less with Christianity, and figuring out this world of religion. And I ever so superficially dabbled in Islam. I bought a Quran. I went to a mosque once or twice. I sort of looked into Buddhism, but I had no mature understanding of what Buddhist philosophy actually was at the time. But it was very superficial. It was very brief, because I knew what I believed in. I knew that I believed in the God of Abraham, and that I had this Abrahamic foundation that I didn't deny. I felt very close to. And so it's really just the Jesus and after part that I took issue with. So I didn't really go so far. And by the time I think I was 18, my freshman year of college, I started dabbling more into Judaism. And I don't know which came first, but I went to a Jewish bookstore, bought a chumash, which I still use and have today, bought How to Keep Kosher by Lee Stern, How to Pray as a Jew by Rabbi Donin, and just, some of the foundational books. And I just kind of figured my way out, started learning things. And again, I don't remember which came first or last, but sometime around this same period, I saw on TV a documentary that was called Trembling Before God. Have you heard of this?
Gosh. Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. Wow. Nobody ever knows, because it's a little dated now, but it was. I love this reaction. It's already good start, because people are like, yes. I don't know.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
You could tell everyone what it is.
Yes.
But
okay.
it is. because maybe it will come out better. I don't want to use wrong
Yeah,
terminology. I'm not
well,
always so good with that,
yeah,
but it was the first for me. Just before that first scene, do you remember that first scene? It was like that
I don't remember the
doctor.
first
It was
scene. I
this
don't.
doctor from a hospital. It was either a psychiatrist, psychologist, who was tending to a woman who was married to a man that had gay tendencies, and she was depressed. And
Mm-hmm.
he didn't. He was trying to treat her for depression. He didn't know why she's depressed.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
and then the husband finally revealed after all that time why he thinks she's depressed. And I remember the reaction of that doctor was, to me, so powerful. So go first, everyone. Okay, everyone's probably wondering, like, what are we talking about? Like, go ahead.
Private joke, yeah. No, so Trembling Before God, it's a documentary that's about frum Jews who are struggling with their sexual orientation, being like gay Jews. And my mind was blown watching this for two reasons. The first thing that struck me was just seeing this whole subject matter, just seeing these people, they were really wrestling, like the true like Israel, like really wrestling and struggling with their faith and how to sort of make sense of their their orientation along with Jewish law, and it was a real struggle, and it was just such a human documentary. Like, it was just so human, seeing that struggle, seeing them really so challenged and really engaging with that challenge like head on, and it was just so intense, and there's just something so powerful and moving about that, just from a human perspective. And the second thing that struck me was this was the first glimpse I had of the Torah world, of Orthodox Judaism. And I grew up around, there were Jews in school, and I had a Jewish friend here or there. So it wasn't something totally foreign to me. I grew up in Massachusetts, and we have a decent Jewish population, but I didn't know what the difference was. Like, I didn't know that there were different types of Judaism, or that there were religious Jews, non-religious Jews. I had no idea. And there were scenes of people praying at the kotel. There were scenes of like a Hasidic wedding. There was a scene of people in a yeshiva like shuckling intensely, and just this glimpse into this world was just like, wow. And I just knew I want that. And what was so striking to me was that here was a people, this wasn't a religion. And I just had it wrong. Like, Judaism was not a religion. It's a lifestyle. It's a complete way of being. And it is pure service to the creator. How can I live, move, feel, think, breathe, everything? Like, how can I dedicate in the entirety of my being into serving Hashem and living as a Jew, as a part of this service? And it was like, wow, that immersive experience, that's what I was craving. And once I understood that was a thing, that this was a different framework for what I understood religion to be, which was a set of beliefs and theology, doctrine, that's where I was coming from. I found that massively appealing, and just this way to connect to Hashem, and I was really excited by that. That being said, this is kind of the faster part of the story. Like, that's sort of the foundation. Fast forward, I spent about 10 years or over a decade, literally within that short time frame of, a couple months, few months of that period when I bought the books, watched the documentary, and got really into it. I decided, like, I'm definitely going to convert, like, for sure, 100% doing this. And I waited well over a decade before I started my first conversion process. I ended up doing two. And the reason was that I was so terrified of the Orthodox world as much as I wanted to be part of it, because I didn't understand this idea of Judaism as a people, this like peoplehood aspect. And it was like, well, I'm Korean, like I'm not Jewish. So like, how can a Korean person be Jewish? Like, it doesn't make sense. And, even if you're sort of like adopted into the community, like you'll never be the same. Or like, I just don't understand how it works. And I didn't understand what a convert is at that point. I thought it was just somebody who just says, okay, like, I'll believe in this and I'll do what you do and I'll, boom, I'm a convert. Like, I didn't understand the depth from more that mystical, metaphysical soul level of what that actually entails, and the obligation, all that. So I just thought, okay, how do I do this? And so I had this self stigma where I thought there's no way they'll ever be accepted in the Orthodox world, like, because I just saw it as this very insular community of people who kind of looked the same as each other. Like, boy, would I be surprised when I come to Israel. But yeah, so, I had this like very narrow understanding of what that meant. And also because of the language barrier, praying in Hebrew, like, whoa, no way, I can't do that. So I spent the better part of 10 years just kind of hopping around in different reform communities, maybe a conservative shul like once or twice. And it was just like, I just felt that, well, in reform communities, they speak English, so they'll be more accepting of me, and I can like, I can make it work. But it wasn't it. Like, that's not what I fell in love with. And it wasn't like Torah life. It wasn't like binding yourself. It just wasn't enough. And so I didn't connect with any community. I didn't continue to go any particular place. I was just kind of hopping around. And eventually I ended up working with a rabbi who was part of a conservative synagogue, a little bit more on the traditional side of conservative. They use an Orthodox candor, and certain things were a little bit more on the traditional side, but it was conservative. And I started working with him on my first conversion process. And I told him, I want to be Orthodox. Like, I want to go through an Orthodox conversion. It was very important to me to be able to be married and buried properly, and have my children never be contested and all that. And there are reasons that I felt like, no, I want to be Orthodox. But I still wasn't ready at that point, because I still was so insecure about being a Korean Jew, or what that meant and how people would perceive me. And again, the language barrier and all that. So he was very, very kind, very understanding, like knew like the final destination where I wanted to go. But he really taught me, the practical aspects of Judaism, like how to pray, how to wash netel yadayim, like how to say brachot. So like, it was that sort of stepping stone that allowed me to actually start learning about Judaism, about actual Jewish practice, in a warm and welcoming setting that felt like a little bit of a baby step, a little bit something gentler than kind of going right into the environment that I would eventually be part of. And Baruch Hashem, that allowed me to make Aliyah, because you're Jewish enough to make Aliyah and pay taxes when you go through a conservative or even a reform conversion. And so I moved here 3 years ago, and went through the rest of my process here, when I just felt like I had like shaken out all those identity issues. And really, it was once I came to Israel and just I was immersed in Jewish life. I was around the Orthodox community, which very pleasantly isn't even a thing here. Like, we don't even say Orthodox or Reform or this or that. Like, there's just Jews. And so I just found like my comfort here and being immersed, and realized like how welcoming everyone is, and how it's so much more about how confidently you step into a community, and just feeling secure in yourself. And so I had to kind of go through this like very long process, and it was literally 18 years between me at 18 years old and deciding like I want to do this, and actually going through and finishing my conversion process like fully, with the rabbinut. So that's where I am today.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So many things. I love the imagery that you use. You speak so well. So I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. And I'm sure the listeners are really enjoying it. I love that imagery that you said, that you had to shake off the feelings that you had, and step in with confidence.
Mm-hmm.
That imagery really, that's for life in general. It's not even just
Right. Right.
coming into a Jewish community. That's in anything that we do, that we
Yeah.
have to learn to shake off fears that we have. And
Yeah.
I just love that, because should I tell you why I think the way you use the terminology "shake it off"? Because fears, if you see them attached to you, then it's hard to detach. But the
Yeah.
way you use that imagery of "shake it off," it's as if it's just like lying on my shoulder, fears that you have. And if you view them like that and you just shake it off, like you could shed them. And
Yeah.
I just love that idea. Don't make them a part of you. They're not intertwined in you, but rather see them as just something laying on you and just shake it off. So I love that.
Yeah.
And then when you use that imagery of, also when you spoke about that, when you have confidence in yourself, that's how people are going to perceive you. And also how you just spoke about Judaism, that it's a lifestyle, and it's about being immersive in it. I work in Kiruv. That's my real job right now. I used to be a teacher, classroom teacher, but now I work for an organization called Olami.
Oh,
And
I love Olemi. Cool. Yeah,
okay,
they're
great.
awesome. You guys are cool.
Yes, yeah, they are. So one of the things I always say about, especially about Shabbat, when people are trying out Shabbat for the first time. And if they were a college student, I try to use this example. And I say, when you first get to a college campus, you don't understand everything. Like someone's saying about a certain hole, they have a terminology, or the lingo. I'm going to bio class. Well, what's bio? I'm going to, whatever the terms
Hmm.
that people use until you live on campus. And all of a sudden, 6 months in, you're talking like everybody else
Right.
because it becomes a lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, even that, it makes me think so much of the stigma I had for myself, and it was me getting in my own way. And I think this happens a lot with converts where we feel like, oh, but I'm so different. I'm so different. I'm so different. And you're walking around thinking I'm so different. I'm so different. And especially if you are, sort of if you're Asian, if you're Black, if you don't look visibly Jewish as most people would assume, you have that even more. And it's just, it's so it's so hindering. Yeah, it's so hindering, and something that I still even catch myself realizing this sometimes when I think, oh, well, I have this different experience, or I have this challenge because I'm a convert, or because I don't have a Jewish family, or whatever it is. And then I hear people say, oh, well, I'm a Bal Tshuva. I have the same situation as you. I'm like, that's right. And you forget that. And I think it's more about going from a non-religious background into a religious background. I think that's more the experience. So I've really come to identify more closely with that Bal Tshuva experience, not specifically being a convert, because there's such a range of people within the spectrum of, these, like, what people identify as a convert. I think it's more about that process of getting into religious life that was more the big deal, not the fact that I'm a convert. I think it's the same for even secular Jews who step into this lifestyle.
Right, 100%, 100%. So now, okay, here we go. And you could answer as much as you feel comfortable
Sure.
answering. Family. What was the family reaction to all of this?
So I had a great situation because, I mean, this was no flash in the pan. It took me over a decade. So my family was not shocked. And I think a lot of times when converts don't have their family support, it's oftentimes because they're going through all these incredible changes very quickly. And a lot of converts, like Bali Chiva, are very zealous and excited and like hardcore and intense. And it can be a little scary for families if you don't sort of ease them into it. And so I think that's often a lot of the issues I see in converts who don't get their family support. And so for me, it was so gradual. It was, oh, I'm not eating this anymore. I'm learning about Judaism. I want to convert. And it was a decade of that, gradually. So it was no shock. And also my family, they're very supportive. They're very open-minded. And our family is very independent. Like each of us has a lot of, it's not like what you would consider a stereotypical Jewish family dynamic. It's very Korean in the sense that we all kind of do our own things and we have a certain level of independence, I guess. So yeah, it was just kind of, I trust you, like you're doing what's good for you. And honestly, over the years, especially over the last few years, as I've become more and more observant, they've just seen me improve. So who doesn't want that for their daughter? So it wasn't some scary thing like we're losing our daughter or you're so different now in any kind of negative way. It's more me, like being more me, being closer to my family, and just, yeah, sort of living more in my fullness.
Wow, I love that. So beautiful that they were able to see your growth. So often, you mentioned the Baal Tshuva. There's also another type where I grew up. I grew up on Orthodox, and there's something called a flip out.
Oh, I've never heard this term.
Okay, so good. I'm so excited. Okay,
Flip out.
a little Jewish information here. Growing up modern Orthodox. So modern Orthodoxy, I don't know, people always ask me, how do I describe modern Orthodoxy? Again, I am not a guru. This is just Jordana's definition of modern Orthodoxy. I would say modern Orthodoxy is more, you follow the mitzvot, you follow the commandments, like definitely Shabbat, keeping Shabbat and keeping kosher, but on the outside, it's not always so obvious that you are Jewish.
Okay.
So let's say for a girl, they're not necessarily following the 100% the dress code,
Yeah.
they're wearing pants, so on. It got that. Okay, fine. So growing up modern Orthodox, so it means usually you go to co-ed schools for day school and high school. It is a custom that the students go to Israel for the year to study for the year. I don't know, you probably see a lot of those kids
Yeah.
around. Okay, so now they call it yeshiva, seminary. When I was younger, it wasn't called seminary. It was just going to Israel for the year, studying abroad, going to Israel for the year. If after your experience of studying in Israel for the year, you became more observant, meaning your outward appearance, like pretty much reflected more of your inward, and you became more dedicated, you were known as a flip out. You flipped out, like.
That's funny.
Okay, so that's what the terminology is. I'm a flip out. My siblings were flip outs. Like my mother doesn't cover her hair. My mother wears pants. Things like that. So I taught for many years children who are modern Orthodox. And what I found a trend, it wasn't with my parents. My parents sound like similar to your parents, that they were very happy. But what is a common thing of parents of flip outs, they get nervous. As parents, we want our kids to be smarter. We want our kids to be richer. We want our kids, all these things, we want more for our kids, but not more religious.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard that a lot.
For some reason, it hits home, or perhaps, I don't know. Again, this is total, like I might be getting like feedback, and after this, podcast, people are like, Jordana, what the heck are you talking about? Again, this is my opinion, that I think sometimes what promotes or causes parents to be nervous about when children are more religiously than they are, they think it's a reflection on them, and they become guilty, or they have this sense of guilt that what they're doing isn't enough. And they know deep down inside, perhaps they should be doing more.
Yeah.
And so when they look at their child, it's just a constant mirror in their face, like, why aren't you doing X, Y, and Z? But if someone feels confident and secure in their own observance, you should only want to, like your parents and my parents, you should only want more, because you see that we are now better people for it.
Yeah.
And what you do is your thing, and what your child is doing, again, just like you wanted a better education for them, like a better connection, a better observance. Who wouldn't want that for their child? So I love that your parents are supportive. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. And I was thinking as you're saying that, well, my mind goes to two places. One, that's like the days of Mashiach, because it's like when the children are teaching the parents, so it makes me excited thinking we're at that stage. But it sort of reminded me of one of the classic ideas of anti-Semitism, where people are so triggered by seeing religious Jews or people acknowledging the creator, and like that's makes you nervous and uncomfortable, and that's where the tension arises. But to your point, like you said, like if you're very confident and steadfast in what you're doing, then they'll respect it. But it's that sort of in between stage. It's a little bit unnerving to people, I think.
Right. I mean, of course, there are people who do it in the wrong way. Like you don't want to throw it in their face. Like,
sure,
I'm not ever coming back to your house ever again. Like there's a way to incorporate things in a respectful fashion, so that there's a sense of mutual respect between the two.
Right.
So have they visited you, your parents, in Israel?
No, not yet. And also since the war, like I don't want to take any risks. Like I'm waiting till things are more settled. But also it just makes more sense for me to visit my family, because it's like nice to have trips back there too. So yeah, it hasn't happened yet.
Okay, so I have this thing in my head. I don't know why I have this in my head. So Korean food is unique.
Yeah.
To me, it would be unique. Have you learned to incorporate some of those Korean traditions into Jewish traditions? Like, is there like a traditional food that you're like, ooh, this is something I could really do at this holiday?
I wouldn't say like necessarily with specific holidays. Like maybe 50% of what I eat is Korean food. So it's just part of my life. And especially being here in Israel away from my family and such, it's like that much more important for me to hold on to that. So, if I'm just eating alone or something, like basically like Korean food becomes infused into my Shabbat table. Like different meals I have will, include Korean food. So it's definitely important for me to keep.
That's so nice. Okay, so I want to get to your name. We, before we started the podcast, I had said to him, or I said, it's so interesting. I always love to hear how people chose their name. I think that really says a lot about them. But I said I would be curious because, when I hear Meorah, I think Me'ira. So I'd love to understand what prompted you to pick Meorah. Go ahead.
Sure. So Meorah is a luminary, so like a source of bright light, like the sun or the moon. And it's interesting. I feel very connected to it because it's my birthday parsha is also Bereshit. So I just feel very connected to this idea of luminaries. And I have kind of a kooky story of how I picked it because when I was going through my conversion process, I knew that, you pick a Hebrew name, and I never connected with my English name, which was Grace. And I think it's a beautiful name, it's a beautiful word, but I just didn't really understand what grace meant, or it just felt very uncomfortable for some reason. And for me, growing up, I also have a Korean name, which when I think of myself inside, I think of myself now as Meorah, but also as my Korean name, which is Hue. And Grace just felt like this outer persona, like the person I am in school, the person I am, to outsiders at work, and really not my inner, not my sort of inner world. Um, so I decided, well, let me change my name and actually use my Hebrew name. And at the time, I was married before the conversion process. I was married at a certain point in my life, and after the divorce, because I was working and everything, I just kept the last name. I happened to like it, so I just kept the married last name. It was, on all my paperwork. So here I had a first name and a last name that I had no real connection with. So I was like, let me take this opportunity to just clear the slate and actually just pick a name that really suits me. Um, and I just, I was kind of stuck with like all, looking at the different name options. And I ended up going to a naming service that was
So
based on
fun.
numerology, but like not gematria, like maybe not super kosher. But I mean, I think, for me, like I believe everything comes from Hashem. So even this for me was a way like Hashem can send me my name through any sort of situation. So it's like, you know what, maybe they'll have some good ideas. So I told them I'm looking for a Jewish name. They sent me a list of name options, and lo and behold, Meorah was one of them. And I looked it up, tried to understand it, and I thought, oh, it's really cool. And I just really connected to it. And when I picked my last name, because they're creating like a balanced name, what was nice is that, so my last name is Ha-Me'ir. So it's Meorah Ha-Me'ir, which the first name, last name conceptually go together. And what I liked about that was that Ha is actually my maiden name. That's my father's family name.
Oh,
And so it was really just lovely to be able to reincorporate that back into my name. But it also makes sense in Hebrew because Ha is like the, so it all kind of just worked. And that's how I came to my name. And it's one of the fun perks of being a convert. They get to like literally pick your own name, which is awesome. And when people say your name is your mazal, it's like, I can't possibly believe that even more. Like it's so true. And I really feel like this is my real name. It's like this was my essence. Like this is what I was supposed to be. And it really goes hand in hand with how I feel about my conversion process. Like I really feel like I didn't choose it. I feel like it was inevitable. I feel like it was more that my neshama was destined for me to reach out and grab and actually walk the path to get there. Not that I learned about Judaism, thought it was nice, and then kind of went through this process on the surface and made any of these choices. Like I really don't think it was a choice. So equally so with my name, I don't think I really picked it. I think it was meant for me to encounter in my life and actually step into to become my full self. And really my personality, my character, like I just feel like who I am as Meorah and not as Grace, which just never really felt like me.
oh, that's so beautiful. Wow, I love that. And I love that the ha came in.
Yeah,
Like,
I know. Yeah, I really love that.
wow.
Yeah. Also,
Yeah.
my father didn't have any sons. It's me and my older sister. So it was just nice to be able to honor that and keep it in the family a little bit.
Oh, wow,
Yeah.
that's so really beautiful. So let's go to challenges. What has been, you would say, the biggest challenge for you in the conversion process, or once you've converted, being in the Jewish lifestyle? Is there any like major challenges?
I think it's what I spoke to before, which was just like me standing in my own way of that whole
Um,
like, oh, I'm not going to be accepted or I'm so different. And, just having that self stigma. It was just crazy looking back at it. And, of course, I appreciate that it had to happen and that this timeline was like, had to unfold as it did for me. But, it's just kind of silly now when I look at it, like how much I was standing in my own way. And I also think it's also like a big part of being from America specifically, where we're so obsessed with identity, so obsessed with
mm,
labels, so obsessed with I'm this, I'm that, I carry this banner and this banner. And, like it's just, you have to like put yourself in all these boxes and like, it just, it's too much. And I feel like I was coming from that place, and something I find challenging. I didn't spend too much time in this space, but I think it's important that I actually bring this up on the podcast for people who might be listening. You know, as a Korean person, as a Korean Jew, I even struggle with this. I tried on this label at one time here and there, but this idea of being a Jew of color, I really don't like that. I think it's very American to say that and to even think that way. And moreover, I really find it to be a challenging space where communities who identify as Jews of color oftentimes um, insulate and isolate themselves within that label. And I think there is something a little bit I'll just say it's a little bit blunt, but there's something a little bit dangerous about overly identifying as that and seeking comfort within people who are just like you. Because at the end of the day, like every Jew is so different. And if you come to Israel, you'll see how extremely, even just visibly diverse all Jews are. We've been literally in every corner of the world, like we're all over the place. So to carry this misunderstanding that you have to find your little corner and that this is your safe space, I think does a lot of damage. And it certainly did a lot of damage to me. And and it was only until I came here to Israel and I realized that's such an American thing to think. Even like the labels of like I'm an Orthodox Jew, I'm a Reformed Jew. It's like that's so American. Like here in Israel, it's like we're just Jews and we're all pretty different and this and that, but it's like it's not really the topic of the day. And I think there's just something, I wish we would break out of that more and just find a little bit more, a little more unity and just, yeah. I found that just topic, that area a bit challenging.
It's
Yeah.
so interesting that you say that. You're not the first person that I had on the podcast. There was someone else that had also said that someone had given her advice. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody, like, and she said that was so damaging. Now she's coming into her own in so many ways, not only her Jewishness and that she's a convert in other aspects of her life as well. And she said that that would be one bit of advice you would give any other converts. Um, don't feel the sense of hiding it.
Yeah.
My intro to my podcast talks about how in Judaism, how there's such an importance of recognizing the ger and the convert and being kind and incorporating them into Jewish life, that so many times the commandments say and the ger and the ger and the ger,
Yeah.
in order to emphasize the importance of the inclusion and not feeling outcasted at all.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but like you said, it has to be something also that comes from within.
Yeah. And actually that's been really such a lovely experience. Feel like I used to feel like, oh, like, why do we have to be called out all the time? The gear, the gear, the gear. It's like, why can't we just blend in and like, be the same? Like, why do you have to call us out all the time? And like, it was very uncomfortable to me. But what I've found is that people really take you under their wing. Like people bring you in, people include you, people want to help you. And I think it's like an incredible privilege of our status, really, of being a little bit, coming from the outside, not having Jewish family. Like people really come together to make sure that you feel good and that you're taken care of. And I've experienced a lot of the positive sides of that. Whereas before I thought that would be the challenge, but that hasn't been the case.
Oh, that's so beautiful. So now, how do you see yourself? What role do you see yourself in the Jewish community today? Like, what do you hope to contribute? I don't like
Yeah.
job wise. What do you do
Yeah.
in Jerusalem, in Israel? Take me through it.
Sure. So I'm a creative director and marketer. I have a creative agency, creative and digital, called Meorah Creative. And I'm really trying to service the Jewish world with any kind of work that I do. So I'm working a lot for Jewish nonprofits. All of my projects and ventures have something to do with Judaism. And I'm sort of struggling with that a little bit sometimes because I also see the value of incorporating commercial work into your life and sort of using that for a holy purpose. So I'm sort of shifting a little bit here. But that's just parnasa. Like for me, the real thing that I do is I'm sharing a lot on YouTube. I'm sharing a lot and you're doing things like this, like trying to just be present in the community. And I'm involved with my synagogue, which is the Jerusalem Great Synagogue. I'm just trying to be as active as I can. And I think the thing that I feel closest to, like it's still not a huge community, but it's growing. And I've been doing YouTube for like 5 or so years. And I'm taking a little bit more seriously now. I have almost 6,000 subscribers. And the reason I started that channel was because when I started to become observant, I was like, this is when I was back in my like obsessive American identity politics sort of stage. But I was like, man, there's nobody who looks like me who's kind of like doing this process and showing it. And like, I don't have any role models and this and that. So it wasn't that I needed to see another Korean person per se. It was more that I wanted to see somebody who came from outside of the religious world who was very much intent on becoming religiously observant. And so I thought, well, let me share this process. And what I hope my role can be is to inspire people to become observant in a way that shows like, if I can do it, you can do it. Like that's sort of my inner little motto, because I want to show people like I don't come from this background. I don't, have family that can teach me how to do certain things. Like I'm picking this up just out of my pure love of wanting to serve my creator, and it's important to me, and this is why, and just unpacking all of that. Like a recent video I did was, which I'm actually in this right now, doing a 40-day period. I really want to wake up early and, daven fully and just have this like powerful morning and all this. And I've struggled a lot with my sleep. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to use YouTube as my accountability. So I explained I'm doing, what will just at least start as a 40-day period of waking up and davening vasiken and actually going to the kotel to do that. So, something like that. It's like, I'm just a normal person, but I really care about this. I value this, and I'm gonna push myself to do it. And if I can share that, and somebody can see like, wow, she was like struggling with her sleep, and now she's waking up at 4 a.m. every day, and like understanding where that drive comes from. That's the kind of stuff I want to share, to just show that it's possible, and really break down this barrier, this like, I put the Torah world, like I put them on such a pedestal, like, wow, it's so impressive. Like they're just so awesome. Like to me, like they're like I feel like the rabbis and like the yeshiva boys, like they're like the cool kids, like who are like doing the thing and like living this cool life. I'm like, wow, like I want to be like them. And I put them on such a pedestal, thinking like I could never be somebody who's like staying up all night on Shavuot, or davening this weekend. But it's like, you know what, I can also do that. We're all human, and I can do that too. And I want to show people that you can do that. Like it's not beyond you. You don't, like, and like what you're saying with being modern and such, like you don't have to like look like you're Haredi to be that religiously observant. It can be a part of a normal, balanced, healthy lifestyle that's very much within reach. And so I want people to know that, and sort of get that fire burning, and actually be motivated to actually, live the fullest experience of divine service that they can muster.
I love that. Ooh, we're gonna have to work on some projects together. I love the energy. I always end each podcast with this interesting question. It's just it's a fun question of talking about our five senses. Everybody relates to their senses a little differently. So I was wondering, which one of your five senses do you feel is the strongest, and how does that play a certain role in your life, and how does that help you in life or Jewish life, and so on and so forth?
So it's hard for me to answer the second part of that question, because my strongest sense is the sense of smell. I'm very sensitive to smell, and I'm very fascinated by this sense just in general. And there's this idea that the sense of smell is the only sense that didn't partake in the sin of eating the apple in Gan Eden. And again, going back to my birthday parsha, I'm like always trying to dig into what is in my parsha that I can learn from, and that I'm supposed to connect with. And so like smell is this like purely spiritual sense. And then there's this idea of how Moshiach is going to judge people and understand who's right or wrong by his sense of smell, his prophetic sense of smell, and that he'll even be able to ascertain which tribe you're from. So it's just such a fascinating thing, and it's still quite a mystery to me. So I can't say where it plays a role in my life, other than getting nauseous very easily and being really disturbed oftentimes by foul odors. But even that, like I'm always thinking like, it's some kind of theme in my life. And I'm one of those people, like, there's a reason for everything. Like, the reason this paper clip is in this particular position is because Hashem needed this. Or, I really believe that. So I'm, even if I smell something that's like really offensive and it kind of rattles me, and I'm like thinking about it like for a long time after, like I actually think like, what is Hashem trying to teach me in this moment? Like what happened? Like what am I either refusing to take in or withholding, or like what is this teaching me? And I'm still trying to dig into understanding how to work with this sense. And I'm sort of just at a stage where I'm very acutely aware of it and aware that it's some kind of theme that I'm continuing to unpack. So if you ever come across any, Jewish references or books or anything that talk about this, please let me know, because it's a fascinating thing to me.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that.
Oh, and
Okay,
I actually had
yeah.
at one point a Besamim line called Lux Besamim, and I was actually selling Besamim. So like there's something about smells that I'm
Okay.
attached to.
I just wanted to give you a warning. Okay, God willing, one day you're going to be pregnant, have children. Your sense of smell is
Oh
going to
boy.
be even more heightened.
Right.
When I
Yeah.
was pregnant, if someone walked into the elevator with me, I knew if they were wearing fake perfume or not, and I'd
Yeah.
be like, oh, I can't breathe. So Garen, but it's so funny you mentioned besamim, because someone else I had interviewed had said also smell, and they said they loved Havdalah time and smelling the besamim and reviving the soul. So
Yeah.
that's so everybody has their own thing about different senses. That's okay, but I
Yeah.
just find it's very interesting.
Yeah.
But I really I thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. People definitely need to go check you out. I love, again, I love your tone of voice. I love
Thanks.
the usage of your words that you use. You're very eloquent. Like I said, I love the imagery that you use. And I think this episode, I would have to say, was informative about you, perhaps a little bit of your journey. I think we got a taste of it, but I think you gave a lot of life wisdom.
No, thank
You
you.
spoke,
Yeah.
and I think that's what was really very beautiful, and that's what I came out with it. So I just want to thank you for sharing that with us, and I hopefully when I'm in Israel, maybe we'll get to meet.
Yeah, for sure. I'm around. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely let me know. That'd be great.
Okay. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thanks so much. This is really fun.